Get hyped, Bruins fans. We're talking about some reasons to be optimistic about the 2024-25 version of our favorite hockey team. Let's get into it, shall we?
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things spoke to be. Today is Friday, January 12th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. We are at the end of another week. You can tell it's been a long one since I just confused July for January. But here we are, talking about 3 reasons why we should be optimistic about the 2024-25 Boston Bruins. Before we get into that, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. And you can find me, my hockey thoughts and dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. Apologies to the YouTube commenter who said they didn't want me wearing a hat on the podcast. It's a Bruins hat. This hat is sick. Why would I not wear this any chance I can get? Anyways, let's jump into it. Yesterday, we discussed 3 reasons why you might be pessimistic about the Bruins this upcoming season. And one of the biggies for me was the end of an elite goalie tandem with Linus Ullmark having been traded to the Ottawa Senators, with Joonas Korpisalo coming in to back up Jeremy Swayman. Now, key in that scenario is the fact that as of right now, Jeremy Swayman remains a Boston Bruin. He's yet to be signed, but all indications are that the Bruins and Jeremy Swayman will reach a deal at some point over the next couple days, weeks, who knows, but it will get done before training camp. And he's one of the best goalies in the NHL. Full stop. The Bruins are lucky to have him, and they will build around him for the foreseeable future. You look at his numbers from last season, he was straight up one of the best goalies in the NHL, and he upped his game significantly in the postseason. He has developed into a legitimate top goaltender in the NHL. He ranked 3rd in save percentage last season among goalies with at least 30 starts. Only Connor Hellebuck at 921 and Thatcher Demko at 918 had better save percentage through the regular season than Jeremy Swayman. He came in at 916 through 44 games played, tied with Joey Daccord of the Seattle Kraken and .001 ahead of counterpart Linus Ullmark. He was a better regular season goalie as well over Sergei Bobrovsky, who had a 915 save percentage in the regular season. If you look at the playoffs, again, he only appeared in 2 rounds, but among goalies with at least 10 appearances in the playoffs, he was the best. A 933 save percentage. He went 6-6 overall, but through 12 games, a 933 save percentage. Only Joseph Woll was a bit better at 964, and he played in 3 games against the Bruins. Pretty remarkable that he put up those numbers, but not really considering some of the Bruins scoring deficiencies that we discussed yesterday. Now, Stanley Cup winner Sergei Bobrovsky down at 906 in the postseason. So one of the reasons why the Bruins were so successful in the regular season, the primary reason I would argue, was the goaltending tandem of Linus Ullmark and Jeremy Swayman. Part of the argument in trading Linus Ullmark was that obviously as much as you may discuss the possibility of a rotation in the playoffs, you typically only go with one guy, and that's Jeremy Swayman. He played unbelievable in the playoffs, gave this team a chance to win, to even beat the Florida Panthers. They took them to a game 6, very tight in that one. You want to be able to allocate your backup goalie resources elsewhere. Ultimately, they only freed up $1.1 something million in cap space by taking on Korpisalo and Kostelic. But the signal was clear that Jeremy Swayman is the man in net moving forward. And based on his play in the regular season, where he was one of the top goalies by way of save percentage, he'll get increased number of starts. You can pencil him in for at least 55, perhaps even 60. Can he handle that workload? Well, yes. He displayed that unbelievably in a high-pressure situation like the postseason. And there's also reason to be somewhat optimistic about Joonas Korpisalo because goalie Bob Essensa, Boston's goalie coach, is one of the best at his role around the NHL. Just look at the performances by Bruins goaltenders over the past couple of decades. They have had great performances out of Tim Thomas, Tuukka Rask, Jeremy Swayman, Linus Ullmark, even guys in between like Yaroslav Halak. He gets the most out of his goaltenders, and hopefully he can do the same for Joonas Korpisalo, who should be a decent enough backup. Not a guy that you want to split starts with Jeremy Swayman per se, but a guy that can play maybe once a week and hopefully give you a chance to win and not setting you back by allowing first goals on first shots like he did quite often last season in Ottawa. But as far as number one goalies go around the NHL, the Bruins have one of the best at his position in Jeremy Swayman. He's still young. He's entering his prime. And if the Bruins win a Stanley Cup in the next 5-6 years, it will no doubt be due to the fine net minding of this young stud. And I'm excited to see him carry the load here for the foreseeable future. Let's please just get him signed. Speaking of signings, breaking news today as the Bruins signed Alec Regula and who was the other guy? Michael Callahan to 1 year, 2-way contracts. So they're shoring up some of the depth on the AHL roster, and they could be call-up candidates in the event of injury. But the Bruins do have a formidable top 6 defensemen, top 7 even. We'll discuss that later on in the podcast. But coming up after the break, another reason to be optimistic about this team, we have a youth movement going on that, if it hits, could be pretty exciting to watch. We'll discuss that here as the podcast continues. Summertime is here, and one of my favorite things to do is grab some tickets to a Major League Baseball game. I love going to baseball games. It's so fun. It's so chill. And the last few times I've gone, it's been via Gametime, an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. They make getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. They have amazing last-minute deals, all-in prices, panoramic views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. So they take all the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. All you have to do is download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Head down to Fenway, check out the Sox today using Gametime. Last-minute tickets at the lowest price guaranteed. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. And while you're on YouTube, check out Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the latest news, analysis, and opinions from across the Locked On universe, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I was scrolling through my Bruins list today and saw that Scott McLaughlin, who's been on the show quite a bit, had an article up today on the Bruins kind of on the fly youth movement. And if you can believe it, the Bruins will be one of the youngest teams in the NHL this coming season. Last year, they added with cheap mid-30s veterans like James Van Riemsdyk, Kevin Shattenkirk. Later, they added Patrick Maroon. Of course, they tried to bring Milan Lucic back. We all know that went off the rails. Technically, Van Riemsdyk and Shattenkirk are still free agents and maybe could return, but the Bruins will be getting younger this upcoming season. They added Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov. Both are 29 years old, so below 30, which is great. The only mid-30s player on the roster is Captain Brad Marchand, who we talked about yesterday as perhaps a guy who could be slowing down, but he did play all 82 games for the Bruins last season, still had 67 points. Charlie Coyle's 32, Hampus Lindholm and Joonas Korpisalo are both 30, and that's it. Everybody else projected to be on the roster is under 30. Alternate captains David Pastrnak and Charlie McAvoy are 28 and 26, respectively. The franchise goalie is Jeremy Swayman. He's 25. That is your core. And a lot of teams would envy those three as your core three players. An elite winger, all-world defenseman, franchise goalie, all in their mid to late 20s. Now, after that, instead of plugging the roster with some veterans and kind of a transition season, you're going to be seeing some younger guys given a chance to thrive. Last year, the Bruins had the 7th oldest opening day roster. Right now, they're projected to be the 7th youngest. And it kind of started last year with the arrivals of Matt Poitras, Johnny Beecher, Mason Lohrei, Justin Brazeau. Now this season, with those guys in the mix, you're going to see Fabian Lysell and Georgi Merkulov given every opportunity to grab a roster spot or two, as they're clearly one forward short at the moment. Danton Heinen, Jake DeBrusk left. There's a hole in the middle six, at least. Whether you put Lysell or Merkulov on the second or third line remains to be seen. But those guys specifically will get opportunities to thrive. And there's also some more recent additions who are proving to be good fits in Boston, guys that had came on in their mid-20s. Pavel Zacha, of course, Morgan Geekie. They took a flyer on Andrew Peeke at the trade deadline. He's still signed for a couple years. He fit in seamlessly with the Boston Bruins. Even Parker Wotherspoon. They added Max Jones, Mark Kastelic, Riley Tufte. The former two, Jones and Kastelic, will also be given every opportunity to jump into the bottom six and make some noise there. So it's a pretty cool thing to see the Bruins getting younger. They're also getting more physical. The Bruins, according to Scott McLaughlin via Elite Prospects, their average height and weight will be 6'2", 208 pounds. That's the Bruins' biggest roster since 02-03, where they had the 700-pound line in Joe Thornton, Glenn Murray, and Mike Knuble. So the Bruins getting younger and bigger at the same time, which you don't see very often. I'm excited to see next steps taken by Matt Poitras, Johnny Beecher, Mason Lohrei, Justin Brazeau, even Trent Frederick, I think, has the opportunity to take some steps forward here with Jake DeBrusk having moved on. He's a guy that could take another step in his development here at age 26. 18 goals, 22 assists last season for 40 points. Could easily see him add to those totals this coming season. Poitras, I'm a huge fan of. Can't wait to see him emerge. Johnny Beecher. The Bruins have some, maybe not a high-end prospect pool, but their best guys are getting an opportunity to hit at the moment with Poitras, Lohrei, and giving them time to kind of replenish the pool, beginning with the selection of Dean Letourneau here in 2024. So that youth movement, a huge reason to be excited about this team. And, it's a bummer to see DeBrusk go, Heinen go. Obviously, it's a bummer to have seen Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci retire last summer, but there's always a new wave of guys coming up, and I'm really excited to watch these guys come into their own as Boston Bruins. So that's another reason to be optimistic. The third is the additions of Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov, and we'll discuss that here as the podcast continues. All right, the third and final reason to get excited about the Bruins for this upcoming season is the new additions. I've mentioned Lindholm, Zadorov, Jones, and talking about youth movement, there's still an opportunity for the Bruins to add youth. Once they sign Jeremy Swayman, they could still have some money left to add a winger. And there are some young guys available, like Daniel Sprong, Philip Zadina, Kyler Yamamoto, Alex Nylander, guys that I think they could target here as some scoring options to at least generate competition in training camp with Lysell and Merkulov. And as, some scoring depth options there. But the biggies, of course, were Lindholm and Zadorov. And I was looking at Dobber Hockey, as I do every day, and they wrote about the moves made by certain teams over the summer. And this was from Michael Clifford, who wrote, the two big additions Boston made were Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov, which is kind of funny because my personal opinion, this is Michael Clifford of Dobber Hockey, is that they're two of the more overrated players in offseason signing contention. The term overrated, however, doesn't mean bad. It simply means not as proficient as their public perception. Not great, but he goes on. Regardless, they are clearly upgrades for Boston. Zadorov effectively takes the roster spot of Matt Grzelcyk, and that's a huge boost defensively for the team. Maybe they didn't necessarily need to get better defensively, but if they're not going to be a high-powered offense, which they won't, then tightening things up even more defensively is a good idea. End quote. My personal opinion, you look at Boston's top six at the moment, and it is pretty darn good. You have Zadorov, McAvoy, Lindholm, Carlo, Lohrei, Peak with Parker Wotherspoon coming in as your seventh guy. I really like that. Wotherspoon looked really good in the playoffs. Peak, again, came in and fit in pretty well. Your top four is interchangeable with perhaps Zadorov and Lohrei switching off at the top. It gives Lohrei some time and space to develop his game at the NHL level and maybe have a bit more freedom in a lesser defensive role. I'm very excited about their top six. And yeah, they're not going to be a lights out offensive team, but they sure as heck are going to be hard to score against. And that comes back to Swayman and the defensive core in front of him. Now, Clifford of Dobber Hockey the same goes for Lindholm. He's not necessarily a high-end first-line center, but he's a clear upgrade over Pavel Zacha as the top-line center, and it allows the team to use Charlie Coyle in a third-line role, provides flexibility for how they want to use Matt Poitras. This is a team that really was one of the best in the East, and whether they are good enough to surpass a team like Florida is fair to ask. Even while losing Jake DeBrusk and Linus Ullmark, they are better now than they were 3 months ago, end quote. I still have some issues with that contention because of the lack of scoring and a need to upgrade on the wings, but they're kind of upgrading on the wings via the addition of Lindholm as Zacha goes to the left wing to play on a line with Lindholm and Pastrnak. Coyle, again, he had a great year last year, but perhaps he is better suited in a third line role, playing with Trent Frederick. It allows perhaps Matt Poitras to skate with Brad Marchand, who could be a very beneficial teacher for him, with Morgan Geekie as a versatile forward skating on the right side there. So those additions, let's be honest. They're probably not, maybe they're not getting exactly what they're paying for here. They're not necessarily getting an elite center. Those cost you well over $10 million these days, though. If you look at, Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Austin Matthews, Nathan McKinnon. They're not getting a top pairing defenseman. And if you look around the league, a lot of middle pair or bottom pair defensemen are getting paid significant amounts of money. These aren't the highest end guys, but they were guys that the Bruins targeted and they believe will fit well within the structure that they have. And there's every reason to believe that based on their track records and what the Bruins are under head coach Jim Montgomery. So yesterday, I was a bit pessimistic. Today, I'm feeling great. Bring on October. I think this Bruins team is going to be very exciting to watch. I don't believe they will take the major step back. I don't believe they will not be a playoff team. And I think they'll be better than a lot of people think. Once again, that's just their MO. People underrate them, write them off. They always come back and are better than what we expect. And I think that will be the case. With the big question mark being what drop off they might experience if Joonas Korpisalo is in net and does not find at least a league average form. All right, so that's it for today's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, my friends. Another week of episodes in the books. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. Please do take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Have a fun weekend. Be back next week to bring you all the latest on the black and gold. I will be taking one day off next week as I'll be going camping with the boys. But otherwise, we keep pressing on here on Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day.